What's going on YouTube? My name is GinJTCG or Chris, and today I'm back doing another Master the Meta series. And today we're going to be doing a mini masterclass on the Bloodmoon Ursaluna deck that Tim Danklin came up with. And I just wanted to say before we get into the video, two quick things. One, I did have a little bit of a head injury at work, so if there's a lot less editing in this video, I apologize. I just wanted to still try to get out some content, but also take it easy on myself and have myself not stare at a screen all day. So I am just going to be kind of recording this in one take, so I apologize for any slip-ups or the whole lot less editing that's going to be on this. It's really just going to be me going through the normal presentation in more of a podcast style, so if you want to just listen along, that would be awesome. And the other one, just enjoy like a little quick 30-second ad from the team and TCG. Before we hop into the matches, we got a quick word from the channel sponsors. First up, we got the TCG Player affiliate link. So if you're going to TCG Player to order any decks, singles, or deck accessories for any card game, does not matter what, make sure you hop on over to TCG Player via my link in the description down below. Clicking on the link and ordering stuff within 48 hours supports the channel in a massive way, so thank you so much to everyone who's been doing that. Also, we got the Draw Pass TCG team, my own competitive team, sponsoring this and all videos on the channel. Hosted by other YouTubers such as the 1912 Titanic Swim team, Chef Husky, I Am Guardian, Totodile Gang, Bluestone, and Professor Gnome, we are putting out great content as an awesome competitive team, so make sure you go hop on over and check out some of the videos, such as Chef Husky's Haters Guides, as well as the Battle VIPs podcast. With all that being said, thank you guys so much for listening to my quick word from the sponsors, and let's hop into today's video. Thank you all for tuning back in, and real quick, just why we're using Bloodmoon Ursaluna as the core in this Tim Danklin Bloodmoon Ursaluna style deck is it is an insane single prize Pokemon. As a single prize Pokemon card, you can force much longer matches from your opponent while still taking OHKOs on really whatever is in the active spot, which we'll get into when we talk about the attack. In general, if you're kind of trying to see like the outline on why single prize Pokemon are so strong, when we get like a good one, it's because we control the pace of play so much more. So if our opponent is playing like a standard 2-prize deck with a bunch of EX Pokemon cards, theoretically we only need to take 3 KOs to close out the game and get our 6 prize cards. When you're playing a single prize Pokemon, you're forcing your opponent to attack 3 more times. So it's not just that we're like a tankier deck or we're a slower paced deck. This actually is a pretty fast paced deck. The reason that single prize Pokemon have such a big advantage is because you're forcing your opponent to take that many more turns. And depending on the deck, sometimes they run out of resources or they have trouble with that type of longevity for a longer paced game. So by playing a pretty much predominantly single prize deck, we actually force the games to be a bit longer, and we control that pace of play a lot more because even with a slower setup, we can still make a massive comeback as we talk about some of the other parts of the deck, such as our OHKO potential. Now, the ability on Bloodmoon Ursaluna is amazing. With Battle Hardened, you can, when you play this Pokemon from your hand, you can attach up to 2 basic fighting energy cards from your hand to this Pokemon. And one of the most annoying things about fighting Pokemon in general in the TCG is that they have such a difficult time getting themselves set up. Oftentimes, they have very high energy costs that do a lot of damage, but there's not great energy acceleration to them in many formats. Right now, with Battle Hardened, we don't have to worry about that at all, because as long as we have a couple fighting energy in our hand, we could just bench it down, and when we do so, we naturally set ourselves up. Now, talking about the Mad Bite attack, and the reason why this card is so powerful. It does 100 base damage, so you're already swinging for good base damage, and you do 30 more damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon, and all a damage counter is just 1 damage marker, so just 10 damage. And remember, that means that we scale theoretically infinitely depending on how much damage is on them, while also like 2-shotting or 1-shotting Pokemon very, very effectively when we talk about cards like Monkey, Dory, and the Solrock with the new Solrock Lunatone package. So this is what I've been playing as my list with based off Tim Danklin's 16. I've changed a couple cards such as the Iron Boulder, which I'll talk about in a minute, but I want to spend a little bit more time talking about Mad Bite. When we have stuff like Adrenabrain and we have stuff like Solrock, we can punch or get 30 extra damage on a Pokemon, or even with Vengeful Punch, we can get 4 damage counters on them when they KO or whatever Pokemon that card is attached to. So we scale Mad Bite very, very nicely, and I know there's been a bunch of charts floating around on Twitter, also on different people's YouTube's channel. Again, I wanted to edit this all in, but I really don't want to stare at the screen as much. If you get 2 damage counters down on a Pokemon you're already swinging for 160 damage plus the 2 damage counters, so you're already taking KOs on some of the smaller EX Pokemon, especially the fighting weak ones such as Pheasantipity. I think it's 3 damage counters is what you need to just clear the board and make sure that you're taking out all of the low HP 2-prize Pokemon. So just one Adrenabrain, there's already 30 damage on your opponent's active, plus the 190 that Mad Bite would now do. You're swinging 220, so you're KOing all of the, like Ogerpons, Pheasantipity, of course, because of weakness. You're taking out Mew and Squawk, even with the resistance. You're taking out stuff like Miraidon or Chiempo with 220 HP. Of course, one of those is fighting weak. And then as you get to a second Adrenabrain or a Soul Rock, you're now KOing things like Charizard, you're KOing Dragapult. You could even, I'm pretty sure, reach Guardy with the Soul Rock attack just because of how much damage you're scaling instantly. So that is a very nice attack to have on that Bloodmoon Ursaluna. It just makes it so it's a good single prize Pokemon as we're getting more Megas in the format that are reaching 380 HP, like the Mega Venusaur. You can definitely reach those pretty comfortably with Ursaluna, which really helps swing the prize rate in your favor, even if you take an extra turn to set up. Now, as we look at some of the other cards in the deck, we're actually only playing 2 copies of the Bloodmoon Ursaluna because we do have other attackers that we utilize at different points in the deck, and we don't have a problem looping even just one Bloodmoon Ursaluna multiple times. So as I mentioned, we do have this Soul Rock Lunatone package, which is not only a consistent draw engine with Lunar Cycle, but with Cosmic Beam swinging for 70 damage. It actually is so important to utilize that constantly in the early game for this deck to make sure that your Bloodmoon is scaling huge damage as you get into the mid and late game. Of course, we have 3 copies of Monkey Dory, which when paired with Calamitous Snowy Mountain naturally set themselves up. So Calamity Snowy Mountain is an amazing stadium, if not the perfect stadium for this deck, because whenever you attach an energy card from your hand to one of your Pokemon, you place 2 damage counters on that Pokemon, which is great for Monkey Dory, because if you bench Monkey Dory and then attach a Dark Energy, you're naturally getting 2 damage counters. But more importantly, it is perfect for the Bloodmoon Ursaluna. If you're worried about getting 3 damage counters in play for your full Adrenabrain, all you have to do is play the Ursaluna, because you're attaching 2 fighting energy from your hand to it. So when you do so, you take 4 damage counters, and then you can Adrenabrain those instantly, especially when comboed with your copy of Crispin. You can set up your Monkey Dory without having to worry about the damage onto it, which of course isn't the worst thing in the world. Again, you're playing a single price deck, you don't mind some extra damage down that you can move the following turn. So Bloodmoon Ursaluna, Calamitous Snowy Mountain, and Monkey Dory kind of create like the perfect combo for a great deck. Now, Pheasantipities are only additional draw past the past the Lunatone, which I haven't felt any problems with. And then I have Iron Bundle just to help function as some extra gust, because I am only playing 1 copy of Boss's Orders in this list. So having that extra Pseudo Gust card, is kind of nice. I definitely really like having the Iron Bundle. I think I like it a little bit more than Countercatcher because we're playing Artisan, so we can kind of dig it out a little bit easier since we do like digging out our stadiums in this deck. And more importantly, there are many decks in the format right now that are utilizing Artisan, so having your Pseudo Gust card through Iron Bundle instead of Countercatcher just to force other Pokemon into the active spot is very nice in a deck like this. Now, Bloodmoon Ursaluna oftentimes functions as a phenomenal late game closer where you need 0 energy for, since we can easily force our opponents deck down to 1 prize card remaining, since we're all single prize Pokemon, and we just have usually 1 Fez in play at different times. But, of course, the other attacker, which I want to spend a little bit more time talking about, is the Iron Boulder with Repulsor Axe. You do 60 damage, and then if you're attacked on the following turn, you place 8 damage counters on your opponent's active Pokemon, which you're probably wondering, why is that such an amazing attack? Why is this included in the deck? It's to counter all the Cornerstone Ogerpons running around. With Tord's Absolbox, with the Tord box running around, there is a ton of cornerstones in the format, and it's making it very, very annoying for this deck to kind of stick its way through. Bloodmoon Ursaluna, the Soul Rock, everything in this deck has an ability really except the Soul Rock. So we need another higher damage attacker that we can utilize. The Iron Boulder is so nice because we put damage counters in play. So if we're up against Tord Box and they happen to have the Charm plus Lively Stadium, a standard 210 damage attack isn't going to do it, so we kind of got to look elsewhere. Repulsor Axe is nice because it sets up for the 2-hit KO perfectly while tanking a hit with its 240 HP, because we also have, I forgot the name of its bottom attack, but it does 200 damage. Now you do discard 2 energy after doing so, but we already play a ton of energy retrieval, so that isn't the worst worry in the world. So we can, just naturally set it back up. We do have things like Crispin. We do have Calamity Snows Mountain plus Monkey Dory, so we could easily, move that damage counters off onto our opponent's Cornerstone and then take it out that way. But I think Iron Boulder has been my favorite way to deal with Cornerstones so far. When we're talking about the supporter count, this deck has some very consistent supporters, as well as a Pokegear attached to it, and Secret Box to make sure we're digging them out. It's a heavy Arven build. We want to use our Fighting Gongs and Nest Balls to set ourselves up, while utilizing Vengeful Punch to set up some damage counters and EXP shares and counter gains to make sure we're attacking as efficiently as possible. With 2 copies of Lily's Determination and 1 copy of Iono, we've got some good hand disruption for our opponent with the Iono, but more importantly, we can kind of draw ourselves into a much bigger hand at the early points of the game or after a pretty rough Iono going into our turn. Now with 1 Crisp and 1 Boss, we've got good energy acceleration and our needed Gusting card just to make sure we're closing out on Pokemon. We really don't care what's in the active spot because we're genuinely trying to just blow it up. It doesn't matter what it is. So we're generally trying to blow up whatever's in the active spot. So having 1 Boss's Orders is pretty nice. There's been times where it's like, man, I wish I had another Gusting card in here, but the list is kind of tight, and I think overall we don't mind the 1 copy of Boss. Now with 4 Fighting Gongs and 4 Night Stretchers, we're making sure that we're not only searching out energy in Pokemon when we need them, but recovering them with 4 copies of Night Stretcher and 3 energy retrievals. So if we play 1 Night Stretcher plus 1 energy retrieval, we have just successfully gotten back Bloodmoon Ursaluna plus 2 fighting energy needed to use the Battle Hardened ability and then get swinging immediately. With the Earthen Vessel, we just have more energy search, which is great in this deck because this deck really needs a lot of energy in your hand to keep it flowing, so that's why we're playing 4 Gongs on top of the Vessel. And then we've got 1 energy switch, which really just moves the energy from one Munkidori to the other. Now, the reason Switch is in this deck, and I think that is a pretty much uncuttable card, is because we have some Pokemon with such high retreat cost. Bloodmoon Ursaluna has a 4 retreat cost, so we can't even retreat it if it's fully set up to attack. And then we also have Iron Boulder and Bloodmoon Ursaluna, which are an absolute pain if you start with them, so we want to make sure we have a way to pivot out of those pretty easily. So having the switch is pretty essential here. Now, when we're talking about stadiums, as I mentioned, we got 3 Calamitous Snowy Mountains and the 1 Artisan to dig out stuff like Iron Bundle. I know the energy count is covered because of my face cam, but in this list I've got 7 Fighting Energy and 4 Dark Energy, just to make sure that we've got tons of energy. We don't totally have to worry about, getting that extra Dark Energy because we've got Energy Switch, and we don't have to worry about prizing a Fighting Energy or 2 because we have more than enough to set up 2 Bloodmoon Ursalunas comfortably, while also utilizing Soul Rock if we need to in the early game as well. Or I should say when we need to. Now, talking about different tech cards for the deck, I've got 3 Pokemon tech cards, and then I've got 3 trainer tech cards for the deck, just based on my playtesting. I haven't totally found if these are absolutely essential yet. I think depends on the format, depends on what we're seeing, but I think these are 3 great options if you're looking to order the deck and you're ordering like the whole 60 or most of it. I would also order the next 6 cards mentioned. One of those is Maractus with Exploding Needles. So not only is Corner just a super nice attack to buy yourself time while you set up, when Maractus is KO'd, you put 6 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. So you're just naturally setting up plays for Bloodmoon Ursaluna. I feel like there's such a great natural synergy between Maractus and the Ursaluna, and I think just having a retreat locking Pokemon, even though we don't have a ton of Gust, can be great when your opponent leads the wrong Pokemon, such as if they lead their own Bloodmoon Ursaluna, if you're up against Dragapult, just keeping that trapped with a Corner can feel very, very nice. The other Pokemon I want to talk about is actually the Psyduck on the right side of the screen with the Damp ability. Just stopping Dusknoirs is so important. If we go back a slide, our Bloodmoon Ursalunas only have 150 health. So if you're up against something like Dragapult, they could do 130 damage from the Dusknoir, and then if they Gust around the Bloodmoon, they actually can take it out very, very easily. With their Phantom Dive attack. So having Damp just to shut down Dusknoir is very important, and I think as we're starting to see a small rise in Dragapult, now that it's found its matchup against Gardevoir to be a little bit better, at the past couple regionals, I think Psyduck is definitely worth considering and should be noted that the only drawback to this card is it takes up a valuable bench spot, but I think other than that, Psyduck feels very, very strong in the deck right now. The last Pokemon I want to talk about is actually the other option I really have for Iron Boulder EX, and that's Koraidon EX. This is the other card that I've been testing as my cornerstone out on top of Soul Rock, because Soul Rock doesn't really cut it in a lot of those decks because they have a lot of healing. With Splitting Beam, you've got some solid spread damage, which actually, again, does set up your Ursaluna very nicely. You do 20 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon, and then 20 damage to your opponent's bench Pokemon. So it's not just there for Cornerstone if you do lead it. It does have a bit of a better top attack. But more importantly, with Gaia Press, you do 230 damage, and regardless of the 30 damage done to yourself, you're just echoing a Cornerstone right there. So, if Tordbox starts to decline in play, but we still see Cornerstone as a popular one of in many decks, I think Koraidon could potentially be the more optimal cornerstone tech. Now, talking about different trainer cards for the deck, one is Lana's Aid. I kind of do love Lana's Aid, even if it's just a one of in the deck. Potentially for a Night Stretcher would be my substitution. You just put any 3 combination of Pokemon that don't have a rule box of basic energy cards from your discard pile into your hand. So that could be a Bloodmoon Ursaluna followed by 2 energy. It could be a Monkey Dory and energy, and whatever other piece you need, such as Iron Bundle. Just in general, I think Lana's Aid is so powerful, and in a single price deck like this, I think it holds a lot of weight and definitely could be worth the one of inclusion. The other card I want to talk about, again jumping to the right side of the screen, is Superior Energy Retrieval. Now this does function as a way to get way more energy back than just the regular energy retrieval. I think the reason I don't have this in my current 60 right now is the discarding 2 cards from your hand. Generally, so many cards hold so much weight and so much value in this deck, so discarding 2 cards often proves to be not as worth it for those 2 energy, especially when we have 3 energy retrievals. I think I'd rather play the Lana's Aid, but I could totally see the argument for Superior Energy Retrieval. I just don't think you would play both of these cards subbed in the deck at the same time. I think you kind of just choose which you want to play as a one of. The other ace spec, which I think is really interesting for this deck, is actually the Max Rod. You put 5 in any combination of Pokemon and basic energy cards from your discard pile into your hand, so this is just even better recovery. I think you guys could kind of see the trend with tech cards I'm going with this deck, is recovery seems to be a really fun thing to utilize. It's not just so much that we're losing a lot of pieces, it's more so the fact that now we're using our discard pile with these tech cards as a safe place to keep our resources to recover them back. So if you're finding yourself utilizing your discard much more as something to consistently take resources back from, I think Max Rod actually feels like a great ace spec for the deck and definitely is worth trying out. Now, jumping into some of the matchup data that I've gotten from Limitless and Trainer Hill, it's got a really fun matchup spread right now. I definitely don't think it's, like the worst matchup spread in the world. I think Golden Go has dipped a little bit in popularity, actually until like a regional or 2 ago. I forgot which regional it just happened, but there actually was a good bit of Golden Go, so I think this is really just like, depends on the right meta call, right? But this deck swings so well into Golden Go. They're doing absolutely nothing in terms of spread. They're a lower HP stage 1 attacking turbo deck, so naturally, actually, we'll just throw Sarah Ledge in that as well. Although Golden Go feels like an auto win, Sarah Ledge is definitely right under that 65% win rate mark, so I think both Sarah Ledge and Golden Go are both matches you could take very comfortably. I think the only thing you have to be mindful of when you're playing against Sarah Ledge is the Briar plus Legacy Energy combo, but if you could work around those, I really do think that both these matchups feel relatively amazing, and as you'll see, many of the turbo decks definitely feel really good when you're using Bloodmoon Ursaluna. Now, Raging Bolt is definitely the next good matchup I want to talk about. Raging Bolt is another bulky, basic turbo type deck, so it's a little bit harder in terms of its pacing compared to Sarah Ledge and Golden Go because it is a basic deck. It could get swinging immediately. Sorry, I dropped my fidget. So that is something to be mindful of, but I think overall it's not the worst deck in the world. I definitely think this is a great matchup for the deck. Crustle is surprisingly not as perfect as you'd expect it to be. Although they do have pretty much only single prize Pokemon, Crustle does play Cornerstone Ogerpon and a ton of healing cards. So if you're not playing a Cornerstone out, or you're not playing something like the Koraidon, which could swing for Oko, Crustle could be super difficult to work around because of that. So, of course, it's still a good matchup. You could still overwhelm this deck. You could still take them out before they set up the Cornerstone. It is definitely a much slower paced deck, and you have pretty much no attacking EXs if they're utilizing the Crustle, but, Cornerstone is really their only win con. Dragapult Charizard is another good deck. This deck does not utilize the Dusknoir, and I think that's why it's the best matchup out of both Dragapult and Charizard. When you combine the two, naturally stuff has to be cut. When we see the Dusknoir be cut, this matchup becomes a whole lot better because they really have a lot less spread when they're just utilizing Phantom Dive. Now, talking about the good matchups here, I think Charizard, Dragapult, and Grimmsnarl can all kind of be lumped into their just bulky stage 2s. Now, while 2 of those utilize Dusknoir, for that bench attack, Grimmsnarl does have the Frostlass plus Monkey Dory package to take out stuff from your bench, so I think the matchup into all 3 actually feels pretty similar, and you need to be very mindful of what's on your bench because it could be taken out like that because all 3 have some good bench damage potential. I think Grimmsnarl is pretty interesting because they actually naturally put damage counters on themselves when they play the Frostlass, and if they're not doing that, their Monkey Dories aren't as strong, so I think you could still take them out pretty well. You just got to be careful because if you leave stuff with damage, like for example the 70 damage from Soul Rock, they could Monkey Dory that off very easily. So I think that is the worst of these 3 Stage 2 decks. And as we talk about Dragapult and Charizard a little bit more, we just need to keep in mind that they can snipe the bench with stuff like Curse Blast off the Dusknoir, but more importantly, we just need to get 60 damage from 2 Monkey Dories or a Soul Rock attack onto any Charizard or Dragapult, and we could take the match from there. I think both of them definitely feel alright. Now, Joltik Box is more of a 50-50 matchup because they do have the Iron Hands to swing and take 2 prize cards at the same pace that you also take 2 prize cards. And while Mad Bite is amazing, even with weakness, it does not OHKO Iron Hands. You actually do need some sort of like Monkey Dory, even if it's just for 1 damage counter, play onto the Iron Hands to take the KO. So it's a bit more of a 50-50 matchup than I'd like, but from my experience and looking at the data, it seems like people are still swinging pretty well into Joltik Box. Now, Flareon, which actually did take down one of the regionals at the time of this recording, is, I mean, a solid deck and has done very well, and I think that's a little bit of a difficult matchup to work around just because of the multitude of different attackers that Flareon Box has. If they're using something like Sylveon to just rip your, like, support Pokemon off your bench and throw them back in your deck, it actually does get pretty difficult to hold momentum. So it actually has become a little bit under that 50% win rate, but I think it's something that definitely could be, you know, like with enough testing, you definitely could find the right steps needed to take down that deck, and I definitely don't think it's the worst matchup. When we're talking about Alakazam now, we're getting into the rough matchups for the deck. Alakazam is a very strong single prize deck as well. That's a rough matchup because they can keep pace with you as a single prize deck, and if you're not playing like a good well-timed Iono or something into Alakazam, this definitely could be a bit of a rough matchup. But of course, you know, every deck kind of falls short somewhere, and I think when you're up against a single prize deck, naturally this matchup isn't going to be as great. Enzork is surprisingly a little bit of a rougher matchup as well, and that is because Enzork does have the capabilities of potentially using their Manatan to snipe Pokemon off your bench, and they also have Hero's Cape, so sometimes they do get above that HP threshold, and you can't totally predict that, so you do miss a KO here, and they do have the consistency to keep pace with you, so I think Zoroark has become a little bit more of a rough matchup, because now they have the bulk to live the maybe first attack that you're going for OHKO, and they also have Monkey Dories easily accessible, so they can move the damage counters off of them and try to take multiple prize card turns at certain points in the game as well. Now, when we're talking about our auto loss matchups, I think it's no surprise that both Gardevoir variants are here. They have a ton of single prize Pokemon, and if they're playing the Jellicent build, they just have item lock for like 80% of the game, which makes the recovery pretty much impossible. So these matchups are absolute trash, and we're not even going to talk about the fact that they're Psychic Pokemon that have a natural 30 damage resistance to fighting, which just forces you to need that extra damage counter on them to take those OHKOs that you were already looking for. Terrabox, I think, is the more surprising of the auto loss matchups, and I think this is really just because early game Wellspring is just so destructive when you're playing Bloodmoon Ursaluna, because you really are going for the Lunatone Soul Rock to get those early damage down, and then play in with a Bloodmoon, and Wellspring Ogerpon generally just has knocked out Crystal plus Crispin, you know, on their second turn, so they can just snipe immediately and just get the ball rolling with that. And they also have things like Van Rotom, which could trade a little bit more evenly to, you know, just kind of disrupt the prize trade a little, set up damage counters on something. If they want to snipe a Bloodmoon with Wellspring, you know, they could hit with Fan Rotom first and then take 2 more important KOs on different attacking Pokemon or something. So in general, Wellspring is a pretty awful matchup to go into when you're playing Bloodmoon Ursaluna box. And that brings me to the overall master ranking for this deck. I think the price of this deck is at a 9 out of 10. Besides Pheasantipity and the option of Psyduck if you really do want to play it, this is a very, very affordable deck. And even Fez isn't super expensive anymore, if I'm not mistaken. Every card you could buy. I mean, you could probably buy this whole deck for what, like 30, maybe 40 bucks if you're playing something like Psyduck. So this deck is a very affordable, wallet-friendly deck that I think is worth buying and isn't too much of a burden for any one person to pick up. When we're talking about the consistency, I think this deck is a 7 out of 10, and I'll get into the base skill level a little bit later, but I think to find this deck operating at the highest level of consistency, you have to be able to see a little bit deeper into your deck and the inner workings of it. This deck involves a lot of recovery, and it involves using your discard pile as a place you can constantly get resources back from, which I think is a little bit harder, but it's definitely not inconsistent, and I wouldn't say it's inconsistent. So I do have it at a 7 out of 10 on consistency. When we're talking about the power level, though, this deck is definitely a 9 out of 10. I mean, you have a single prize Pokemon that could pretty easily swing for OHKO and pretty much whatever you throw at it with the right combo. So I think the power level on this deck is actually insane, and you should definitely go try it out if you're looking for a fun single prize Pokemon like Alakazam that could blow up whatever you're staring at. The matchups for this deck, I think, are currently at a 5 out of 10. I think there's a little bit too much popularity on decks, of course, like Dragapult, Gardevoir, and now Charizard, and that makes it a little bit harder for this deck to find the perfect matchup spread to totally take down a tournament. I think there's just too many Stage 2 Pokemon with spread potential, but of course, if you're playing at a more localized meta and you kind of know what you're bringing this to, or you've got the perfect meta prediction and the format changes to be a lot more turbo decks, I think this deck is actually one really worth considering, because this deck swings amazing into the other half of the meta, like Saralege, Golden Go, and Raging Bolt, which are definitely more turbo focused. So, you know, I think this deck has a 50-50 kind of matchup spread. The speed for this deck is definitely a 7 out of 10. I mean, this deck gets the ball rolling pretty comfortably. I just don't think it's higher than a 7 out of 10, because I'd say 9 times out of 10 you're looking for that Soul Rock attack turn 1, which isn't the most overwhelming thing and really does just play more of a role in setting up damage for you later. But I think the speed on this deck is very respectable and should definitely be at a 7 out of 10. Now, the versatility of this deck is an 8 out of 10. I think this deck is very adaptable and can swing well into many different meta matchups, and even many rogue matchups, which not a lot of rogue decks also do. Many rogue decks are geared at just kind of taking down the meta. I think the versatility with this deck is you just need to be good at math to know how many damage counters are the minimum needed for Bloodmoon Ursaluna to KO, so that you can use the excess damage counters to take out other stuff later in the game. So I think this deck has a very adaptable and versatile type of gameplay, and for that, I think it's got an 8 out of 10 versatility. Now, the base skill level needed for this deck is definitely a little bit harder than most. I've got it at a 6 out of 10. I think the core function of this deck is pretty easy to grasp, and it's pretty cool to look at. I think as you're playing this deck into the mid and late game, it gets a little bit harder to pilot, and I think its base skill level drops compared to something like Dragapult or Saralege, which is a little bit easier to pick up and pilot throughout the course of the whole game. Now, the overall ranking for this deck is a 7.3 out of 10. I think this deck is super strong right now. I think as far as rogue decks go, this is a really fun one to play. And I think with more time, dedicated time to test and play out the matchups, I think some of these matchups might not seem as bad as they are right now. I'm kind of just going off my own personal playing experience while also utilizing Limitless and Trainer Hell for data. So I think that's really like the biggest thing holding this back is the matchups, the matchup spread and kind of how you play into a lot of certain decks. So with more time, I think this rating is definitely one that could go up, but I think right now a 7.3 out of 10 on a super rogue and very new deck to the format is a pretty awesome rating. So shout out to Danklin for creating this list, and I'm really hoping someone could do really well with it at maybe one of the upcoming majors. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the masterclass. As always, thank you so much to everyone who is watching. I hope you all are doing amazing, and if there's any master classes, you know, in this format, hopefully with a little bit more editing after I recover a bit from the head injury, definitely let me know on what you guys want to see. I'd love to make a masterclass on kind of whatever deck you got out there. I kind of like these little breakdowns. I feel like I've gotten some great feedback that they really do help people and provide some more insight into certain matchups and different tech cards and stuff like that. So let me know what you guys want to see. With that being said, I hope everyone's doing amazing. Stay epic. Peace.